Welcome to another OU Insider Under the Visor Sooners podcast. My name is Brandon Drum. I'm here with Parker Thune. And what a weekend it was for the University of Oklahoma, at least going 1 for 2. The last, few weeks have been exciting for OU fans, and we can dive into all that. We will. We're going to talk Amarian Robinson's commitment, what that means for Oklahoma, particularly the safety room. Moving forward, we're going to talk about, obviously, Lamont Rogers choosing Missouri over Oklahoma. We're going to talk about Michael Fasusi. We're going to talk about Andrew Babbel, the remaining 2 offensive tackles that Bill Bedenbaugh is after. We are also going to discuss, obviously, Petchak and the defensive end spot and see kind of Parker will dive into that. He has information on that stuff, and then we'll talk 26 a little bit, and then SEC Media Days is coming up. There's a ton to talk about. We will dive into that right here, right now. But first, Parker, let's hear it. What bills do we have to pay today?
Well, we got a new sponsor in the mix. This episode of the Under the Visor podcast is brought to you by Chubbies. And folks, I love Chubbies. Amazing clothing line. When it comes to style and comfort in the form of men's shorts, you literally cannot do better than the Chubbies iconic original stretch shorts. And I love their Friday shirt. You remember that flowery shirt that I was wearing at the Publishers Conference, Brandon? That was a Chubbies shirt. That was the Friday shirt. It's awesome. They shipped you one. They actually shipped it to me, so I got to get it to you the next time we see each other. But folks, Chubbies is awesome. A lifestyle apparel brand that has no equivalent in all of human history. When others see you sporting Chubbies in the wild, they're bound to say, oh, wow, that person's wearing Chubbies. I now immediately respect them and think they're cool. Now, you can pair the original stretch shorts with Chubbies' lineup of Friday shirts, and now you're cooking with gas. From casual button-downs to retro-inspired prints, these shirts are built to kick back, chill out, or party down, maybe even all 3 at once if you're really feeling it. And for a limited time, Chubbies has given our listeners 20% off your order with our exclusive code. That is code OU Insider at chubbyshorts.com. Again, folks, that's 20% off your order with the promo code OU Insider. Support our show and tell them we sent you. Don't just blend in with the crowd. Stand out with Chubbies. Again, for a limited time, our friends at Chubbies are giving you, our listeners, 20% off when you use the promo code OU Insider at checkout at chubbyshorts.com. That's 20% off your order with the promo code OU Insider. Let's rock and roll.
Yeah, I love. Yeah, I'm not going to say that. You said I love Chubbies, and I just about lost it.
As you are wont to do.
And you said sporting Chubbies in the wild, and that one about got me too. Well, we go from Manscaped to Chubbies to Mando.
We got some clever advertisers.
We got
the
some
folks
clever
that write that ad copy. They know exactly what they're doing.
Yep,
it's as if they wrote it specifically for you, Brandon.
Yeah, I will say that my brother-in-law is he loves wearing Chubbies. I about said he's a big Chubbies fan. That would have just came out very wrong. He likes wearing Chubbies. He got some for his birthday. I believe we bought them for him because that's all he literally wears as far as shorts go. So, and he's been that way since he was like 16 years old. So, yeah, they're supposedly they're comfortable. I can't wait to try them out. All right. Well, enough about the Chubbies. I digress. Parker, let's talk. I think everybody do we start with the good news or do we start with the bad news? Because if we start with the good news, it's Lamont Robinson. Sorry, no, it's not Lamont Robinson. It's Amarian Robinson. And that was a big pickup. But I think we need to start with the bad news and the fact that Lamont Robinson, the Rivals 100, one of the top players in the country, offensive tackle, according to Rivals.com, chose Missouri over Oklahoma again. Everybody's going to sit there and say, oh, well, Missouri owns Oklahoma when it comes to offensive linemen. Well, yeah, I guess. Missouri was always kind of, and we talked about that on every update I put up on OU Insider and even stuff that you put up. Missouri was always kind of the team that was lingering in the back, right? And you had a pick in for Missouri for a long time.
I did. Came very, very close to bailing on it on several occasions. Yeah. Ended up not doing so.
Yeah, and you didn't. And here's the thing. And people, there were some people that were hating on us, and particularly me, on OU Insider because I said OU led.
Which they did.
Um, they did up
They did.
until the very last 48 hours. Um, where I got that from, and I'm just gonna flat out say, I got it from the kid. The kid, Parker, you were there. The kid literally called me and said, "I'm going to Oklahoma," and that was on the 25th of June. And up until the Texas buzz, so for about 8, 9, 10 days, that's all it was Oklahoma, Oklahoma, Oklahoma. He's tweeting about Oklahoma constantly, and then a random Texas tweet gets thrown out there. Obviously, there was reasons for that. There was connections within the Texas high school coaching ranks. Obviously, I forget his last. It's Chris. What's his name?
Gilbert.
Chris Gilbert. Yes, and so he was hired by Sark as a special assistant to the head coach, which essentially he's a high school relations guy without being the Texas high school relations guy, without being the Texas high school football relations guy title. And he's done a lot of really good work for Texas in that aspect. And Texas did try, they didn't throw the money particularly at Lamont Rogers himself. It was talked about through people, through him, not his mom, not him, other people. And so there was some Texas buzz that started to take place, buzz that I didn't really buy all the way into. And I know that you had said stuff about it, but you weren't fully invested in that because it was something that we couldn't really verify through his people. Because when you talk to his people, it also became, yeah, but there was always that, yeah, but with Texas, right?
Yeah, well, here was the thing about Texas. I know for a fact they got more involved from an NIL standpoint.
They did.
Late in the game.
They did.
That happened. But Lamont's mom didn't go with him on the Texas visit. From everything we heard, that the Texas visit just didn't go all that well. And so if it was going to be a school within reasonable proximity, and obviously Rogers has reasons why proximity is important for him in his specific circumstances, not necessarily the determining factor, but certainly a piece of the puzzle. If there was going to be a school that he'd leaned toward for proximity's sake, if he was going to eschew Missouri and stay close to home, it was probably going to be Oklahoma at that point because, as we've discussed, the Sooners are willing to play ball in the NIL department and did for Lamont Rogers. And they came up a little short. And to me, Brandon, look, we could go on for 45 minutes to an hour about the whole Bill Bedenbaugh conversation. And it feels like every single time Oklahoma loses out on the recruitment of a key offensive lineman, it's Coach B getting raked over the coals on the message boards again. And here's the thing. I think there are enough folks at this point that understand that Bill Bedenbaugh doesn't write the checks, that they're not as hard on him as they once were. But in replacement of that, in lieu of that, there seems to be a new contingent of the fan base that immediately begins asking, well, if Oklahoma's serious about NIL, why wouldn't they have gone to bat and made it happen with Lamont Rogers? And to me, Brandon, that's just a very short-sighted way of looking at things, because the reality is, and I know I've long said it, you've said it as well, we fully believe Oklahoma is going to get one of the big four: Ty Haywood, Michael Fasusi, Andrew Babalola, Lamont Rogers. Only one of those four is off the board right now, and it's Lamont Rogers. Granted, it doesn't look like Oklahoma is going to get Ty Haywood. I will grant you that. But only one of the four is off the board. And so what we should not conflate is an unwillingness to pay the highest price for one individual player with a tendency to act cavalier about all things NIL pertinent to one specific position group.
Yeah.
Just because Oklahoma didn't throw out the biggest offer for Lamont Rogers does not mean that they're going to be 1 foot in, 1 foot out in the NIL space with the recruitments of offensive tackles in this class in general. When Fasusi and Babalola's decisions come down, okay, maybe this conversation becomes a little bit more pertinent, a little bit more interesting. But for the moment, I don't think anybody that is saying OU's not serious about NIL if they didn't go make the biggest offer to Lamont Rogers, like that's just not true.
Yeah. Well, I think where people are coming from, and I can see why. And I'm going to play devil's advocate here with what you're saying. Kind of the caveat of everything is, why do they do it with defensive linemen all the time? Like as of late, they are willing to be the highest bidder no matter what for defensive linemen, but yet offensive linemen, they seem to have a cap on it. And
Okay,
that's kind of the question. That's kind of the question
they did it
that
with
fans
Dominic
have.
Williams. They did it with Dominic
And David
Williams.
Stone
I don't know that there's a
and Jaden
trend
Jackson.
there. Did Oklahoma have the highest offer for David Stone?
Well, no, outside of that, Miami had a higher offer, but he was always they had the second highest, and that's all you needed to do for him.
With Dominic Williams, though.
But with Jaden Jackson is the other.
Here's what it boils down to, though. It's lack of a viable alternative. You paid up for Dominic Williams because you needed another defensive tackle and a good one, and he was a defensive tackle.
I agree.
And see, the drop-off between Dominic Williams and anybody else you could have gotten a defensive tackle was sizable, right? We all understand that. With Lamont Rogers, and here's the thing. We've discussed this on the OUinsider.com VIP board, is that Oklahoma's not going to quit recruiting Lamont Rogers. This thing isn't over. Now, that isn't to say you count on him backing off his pledge to Missouri, but OU's going to continue to recruit him. They're obviously going to continue.
Unless they land Fasusi or Babalola, then they're done.
Yeah. So they're not giving up the ghost in the recruitment of Lamont Rogers. They're still heavy in their pursuit of Fasusi and Babalola. So let's see where all the chips fall before we start drawing sweeping conclusions about Oklahoma and what they're willing to do and not do in the NIL space. That's my message to folks that are losing it a little bit on the message boards lately.
Yeah. And I agree. I was just throwing where they're coming from on that. Cause I mean, if you were somebody that doesn't understand or you don't have all the puzzle pieces, right, to put everything together and come to a solid conclusion on everything, you're going to base what you see in front of you, and that is what Oklahoma's been doing with defensive tackles and not so much with offensive tackles, and that's where they're going to come from. And so I see where they're coming from, but there is obviously more to it than meets the eye that people aren't getting at. Like there's a lot more moving parts to it than just, oh, well, Oklahoma did this or that for defensive tackles. There was a necessity for that. And that's not to say there's not a necessity for an offensive tackle. The good news for Oklahoma is that they have Ryan Foje already in the boat, right?
Mm-hmm.
A guy that can definitely play offensive tackle. He may project more so as a guard at the next level, but so did Cody Ford, and he became an elite offensive tackle at the next level. So Ryan Foje could be that guy for Oklahoma if he has to be, and he could be an elite guy. He's still doing this in the rankings very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. So, and it's not going to stop. And so that's where fans also need to realize, like, they're not bare at offensive tackle in this class. They've got 3 really good offensive linemen already committed to them, and Darius Afalava, Owen Hollenbeck, and obviously Ryan Foje. And now you roll over to, I guess, what they did in 2024, Eddie Pierre-Louis, obviously Akankumi, trying to think of who I always start drawing a blank here, but
Isaiah Autry,
and
Josh Isosa,
Josh Isosa, those 4,
and obviously BJ Brooks.
So this 5, they got 5. 2 of them were considered elite in Brooks, and obviously Eddie Pierre-Louis. Autry, 4-star, right? Isosa and Akinkumi was close to being a 4-star at the end of
He
the day.
was.
Very close. Did a phenomenal job at the Under Armour camp last year, and he's been a guy that people inside the offices of the Barry Switzer Center have long said may have the highest ceiling out of them all.
Yeah.
Because of his work ethic and how raw he was coming out of the NFL Academy in London. So it's not like the cupboard's bare. It's not like Beanbo hasn't been recruiting well, and y'all are going to sit there going, oh, here they go. OU insider, sunshine pumper. No, we're being pretty based on this is what we're being. We're not trying to be this or this.
Yeah.
We're pretty level on this. Like, go look at the reality of the situation. You can't have a recency bias towards a miss, particularly when there's National Signing Day is how far away, Parker. If Oklahoma stays with Lamont Rogers, and I'd even talked to people around him, there are people said that this thing is long from over.
Mm-hmm.
It is long from over. And so, like, if I'm an OU fan right now, I'm going to sit here, I'm going to go, okay, that sucked, but it's July. You still got 5 months until this thing's over with. And if Oklahoma goes out and let's say they go 9-3 in the SEC, year one, they back themselves into the college football playoffs, which is a potential reality, by the way, even though the schedule is super tough. You can't sit there and tell me that they're not going to flip somebody down the line. Because, go ahead.
And no, like here's how I look at it as well. As Oklahoma waits on decisions from Fasusi and Babalola and they try to flip Rod, like whatever the outcomes there, one thing that we do know that we have enough breadth of experience to say authoritatively is that Bill Bedenbaugh's not going to be sitting on his hands. And the folks in the OU personnel office are not going to be sitting on their hands, waiting and waiting and waiting and putting all their chips in the middle and getting one of those big-time offensive tackles. Now, look, I have long said, I think they'll get one of the big four. I wholeheartedly believe that. And if I look like an idiot when they strike out at the end of the day, I'll own that. I'll be willing to take that. I firmly believe OU is going to do whatever it takes to make sure
you're
they
not
get one of
alone
those
in
four.
that. I think everybody said that
across
the
consider last
services.
cycle. And people go back to the Grant Bricks recruitment a lot lately because that was one that OU led, and then the lead started shrinking and everything dragged out. And at the end of the day, he just wants to stay close to home, and he ends up picking Nebraska. And he was obviously a top 100 player last cycle. And that was one that I think a lot of folks are still bummed out by because they felt like that's a battle that Bill Bedenbaugh should be able to win. Now, look, circumstantial, like I'm just not going to fight that battle on a circumstantial basis. That kid had his reasons for wanting to stay close to home, and I absolutely understand it. But what I think gets lost in the shuffle in that whole conversation is that while that was happening, while the Sooners were waiting and waiting and waiting for Bricks to make a decision, they weren't sitting idly by. They went and evaled Akinkumi and pushed for him and got him committed. With how squirrely Eddie Pierre-Louis was throughout the whole summer and fall between OU and UCF, Oklahoma could have easily just said, okay, you know what, screw it. We'll count on getting Bricks. We're not even going to play this game anymore. They went all the way down to the wire, but the week before signing day to lock down Eddie Pierre-Louis.
UCF,
and they got him done. They got it done. And so whatever happens, one thing you know, and one thing that anybody who has followed OU recruiting over the years should be aware of and should understand well is that Oklahoma isn't going to be content to have an objectively subpar recruiting class on the offensive line. They've already got the three really good pieces you mentioned, Hollenbeck, Foje, Afalava. I think they get one of the big boys at offensive tackle to close things out. But regardless of who that is, regardless of what the final makeup of this class looks like on the offensive line, here's what I will always come back to, is that is Bill Bedenbaugh the best recruiter of offensive line talent in the country? No, I don't think so. Is he the best developer of offensive line talent in the country? I firmly believe he is. I think many would concur with that. Which one would you rather have? Would you rather have the best recruiter or would you rather have the best developer?
I'd rather have both.
I'll leave it at that.
Both.
Yeah, you'd love to have both. You'd love to have both. We know what Coach B is, right? Like Coach B is an old school coach. There are some guys where he's just he doesn't speak their language. You know, they're not going to want to come play for a guy like that. They're not going to want to come play for a guy that's going to cuss you out and get on
Hayden Green. Sorry. I got a hair in my throat for a second. That was for the Missouri fans watching. Because there's gonna be, particularly because we're talking Rogers, and they're gonna be in the comments, and they're gonna say what they want to say, and blah blah blah, blah and whatever. I don't care. It's fun. It's all fun and games. Anyways, there was some good news though. Oh, you know what? Before we do that, let's talk. Let's talk Fasusi, because that's instantly where people go to. But I'm first we're going to talk Babalola, because that's not over. I reported on OU Insider this last week. Now, do I think OU is going to get Babalola? I'm holding my breath if I'm you guys. But the longer this thing drags out, the more I start to believe that there's a reality there, to be honest with you. And when you talk, like, it used to be, okay, Auburn was in on it. Who else? Auburn, Missouri, and who else was in on this thing?
Kansas and K-State for a while.
Yeah, Kansas, but
now,
it's essentially come down to 3 now.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this much. Michigan is gaining confidence with Babalola, which I would not have said 3 or 4 weeks ago that Michigan was.
But
in
it's not shocking with their education.
It's not shocking. It's not shocking. Michigan makes sense fit-wise in an all-around sense for a guy like Babbel.
And Sharon Moore can recruit.
That he can.
And he can develop.
Stanford's been there. And Stanford's very presence in that battle would tell you that money is not the factor that's going to decide Babelola's recruitment, because Stanford ain't paying. I'll tell you that much. Stanford's not paying. So if he winds up going to Stanford, that is all the proof you need that guy, that kid didn't make the decision for money's sake. And the fact that Stanford is as good of a position as they are in right now with Babalola strongly suggests that this is not a decision that will be made for money's sake. Now, if money is not the objective in this decision, if that's not the end game, if you're not just trying to make as much as you can out of whatever school you end up at, then ultimately where you split the hairs between Stanford and Michigan and Oklahoma is, well, what do you want? Do you want a degree that academically has a lot of prestige? Because if so, Stanford's the choice. But if your main objective is to get developed, if your main objective is to go play in the NFL, that's where Oklahoma really, really has a strong case for Babalola. And I would imagine that their efforts, as this process winds to a conclusion, are going to consist of attempting to convince the kid that, hey, NFL development is actually what you want. That Stanford degree, that's all well and good, but there's a reason why Walter Rouse came here for his senior year, right? And there's a reason why after 1 year at Oklahoma, he's now in the NFL with the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, and I talked to somebody about just Rouse specifically, because if there's anybody that would be able to talk to Babalola and make him understand the gravitas of the situation that he's in right now, short and long term, education and non-education wise, it would be right. It'd be Rouse, 100%. So the source I talked to, I said, so every time I've talked to Rouse, I told them you could just tell that there was more to his transfer decision, and it had nothing to do with education with this transfer, and that's fine. He did his thing at Stanford. I don't Did he end up getting his degree at Stanford? I can't remember. Did he end up getting his degree
I don't know
at
whether he's
Stanford?
gotten it yet. I know he intends to
He
finish. So he
tends to go
left
back,
with the
right?
intention of finishing his
Right.
degree at Stanford.
But he got enough credits at the University of Oklahoma that he was able to. I believe he graduated from Oklahoma, but he's going to go and finish that same degree at. And don't quote me on the graduation, but I believe it. There was photos of him walking, correct, at OU? Was that not?
I can't recall.
I can't recall either, but I thought there was. Maybe I'm just making that up in my head. If I am, I'm sorry. But I know he was going to take the credits and go back because I guess they were going to. Stanford was going to take them. I guess my understanding, but it had everything to do with him wanting to get into the draft because he still had a dream of playing in the NFL before he became the, I guess the, what was he, the chemist? I can't remember what side of the chemistry it was, but it was crazy.
It was chemical. I think it was chemical engineering, chemical or
yeah,
electrical.
with like a focus in something really crazy, robotics or whatever. And so, yeah, he's a different breed. And I think Babalola kind of goes in that. So Beanbo knows how to relate to that. And I think that's something that has been very clear with Oklahoma being in the same the same top three with Stanford and Michigan. And we're talking about two of the elite education institutions in the United States. And that's not belittling the University of Oklahoma because it has come a long ways to where it, for a good period of time, it was a top 100 university and over the last decade. So it's definitely not a bad institution. It's just of the three, it's the lesser of the three when it comes to education. Again, that's not a knock on Oklahoma. That's just how elite Michigan and Stanford are education wise, right? Like it is what it is, particularly in what he wants to do, and that's medical.
Mm-hmm.
And again, OU medical is elite. Stanford and Michigan are in a class of their own with the rest of the Ivy League schools and everything else. Like they're just different, right, Parker? Like it's just different. And so I think Oklahoma's medical institution being as highly thought of as it is, Parker, is why Oklahoma's even in the same category as those two with Babbel. Would you agree with that?
I would.
So, I mean, go ahead.
I also just think Bill Bedenbaugh's a lot better at relating to kids than many give him credit for.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think that goes without saying always. Particularly if somebody as mature as Babbel. Mm-hmm. So he's going to relate for somebody that is mature and has a distinct kind of drive of what their future wants to be. That is going to be somebody that Bill Bedenbaugh is going to cling to every time, 10 out of 10 times. Still, I think if I was going to pick between the two, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. It doesn't matter if I'm wrong or right because you're getting two elite. You're getting an elite offensive tackle, whether it's Fasusi or Babalola. And then I would choose Fasusi right now just because of where things stand and the fact that, okay, so you missed out on Rogers. You know NIL is not going to play a massive part in Babalola, so you don't have to worry about upping the ante for him. Now you have this money that you can roll over to Fasusi that you were potentially going to use, or at least a portion of that money over to Fasusi, right? Like that's how you can look at this. And then when I talk to people, and I talk to Fasusi a lot, and he will flat out tell you his favorite coach to talk to is Bill Bedenbaugh. He says it publicly. That's his favorite coach. Now, does that make Oklahoma win out? I don't know. We've heard that before. Bill Bedenbaugh's related to several offensive linemen that he hasn't landed. That's fine.
Yeah.
Money is going to play a factor here. It's how close can Oklahoma get to Texas's offering? And I think that is going to be the key down the stretch. This is an Oklahoma-Texas battle. It just is. Fasusi, and the reason why Missouri went all in on Rogers is because they were literally out of it at that time, or at least in their mind, they were out of it with Fasusi. That doesn't mean they're not going to come in and throw a huge bag and get back in it later on.
Yeah, look.
But at that point in time, they thought they were out of it. They were playing behind the 8 ball with Texas and Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So they're going to go all in with Rogers. Same thing with A&M.
And money is a great
told.
equalizer these days in recruiting. And I would hope there is no stigma anymore. Like, we all know it's happening. We all see it's happening. I think it's really, really like, for instance, I talked to Mark Hennichor the day before he committed last week. Obviously, he wound up picking SMU. And I asked him why. The first thing he said was, hey, look, SMU took care of me NIL wise. I think it's something that guys are getting more comfortable with acknowledging because they realize this is the way.
There was more to it than that, though.
What?
There was more to it than that with it.
Oh, I understand that. But at the very least, it's something that is no longer taboo. And that, more power to you if you want to go maximize your earning potential at your school of choice. But money really is the great equalizer, because 3 weeks ago, the word was Missouri's just too far away for Rogers. And now here we are, and he's committed to Missouri. And the thing with Fasusi is, from the Texas side, and what's interesting with Texas right now is they have whiffed big on a lot of big targets lately. Brandon Brown flipped to LSU. Obviously, DeCorian Moore went to Oregon. Riley Pettijohn picked Ohio State. So they're big time targets left and right that Texas has not been able to close on. And so you would figure that increases their desire to go and get Fasusi. Now, there's been this feeling from a number of different sources that I've talked to that Fasusi just doesn't really mesh with Texas. And it was kind of a similar situation with Rogers. Like, neither of those guys seemed like a great, it just, the vibe wasn't there for them at Texas. And so I think there's probably, like, you hear it from enough people and you have to concede that there is some element of truth to it. The question is, does that matter in the end if Texas is willing to fork over enough money?
Well, here's the thing that I want people to also understand. So we're at the publishers meeting, and I think I'm not giving away too much here. And we got to talking to certain people around just about everything. And when you go to these publishers meetings, it's not just Texas people. Like, there's people from all over, all walks of life, even people outside the Rivals network that come to these things that have very solid sources around college football. And so in between one of the sessions, I'm talking, and Fasusi comes up, and money in NIL came up, and they said, well, what we're hearing is that Texas, they have a way that they do things, and they're not willing to deter from that, much like Oklahoma, which is why I think Sark is going to be successful there, because he's not willing to pander to the donors 24/7, right, that try to manipulate things at Texas, which has been their downfall for such a long time.
Yes,
too many hands in the cookie jar type deal. He's not willing to do that, and he has a way he's going to operate. And if you're not willing to operate within those confines, they're not going to take you. And I think Oklahoma's same thing. Like, and Lamont Rogers is a great kid. Lamont Rogers did not lie to me when he said he was going to Oklahoma at the time. Things changed. And I think that's what people need to understand, is that, oh, well, you said he told you that, so that means he lied to you. No, he didn't lie to me. When a kid calls you and is like, man, please don't put in a crystal ball or feature cast or whatever pick, I'm going to Oklahoma. That's where my heart's at. Okay, that was 12 days before his decision. And at that point in time, he was actually going to decide on July 3rd. And it changed to July 6th after that. Like, it had changed. At first, it was June 29th. Then it was July 3rd. Then Then it was June 29th, back to July 3rd. Then July 6th was the final date. So it changed. And that needs to tell you that he did not lie, that he just changed. He's a 17-year-old kid that is taking summer school, that was trying to make sure he graduated early. So there was a lot going on with him and a lot of pressure. Missouri did something as well. And I want to, before I get back in the pursuit thing, close this out with Rogers. They figured out some things with his family situation to make it work.
Yeah.
And that was very, very big. Now, Mama she still wasn't on board. I'm just going to let everybody know. Like, she was OU and OU. Like, that was if you watch the video, you can see she was OU, but she still supported her baby. And I think that is key there. Like, it was always, and she made that very clear to everybody, even the coaches at Horn. It is Lamont's decision. At the end of the day, he is making it, and I'm going to be behind that. Even if she disagreed and that wasn't her favorite spot, she's still going to support her child. And that was that. Like, you saw a little bit of reaction, then you heard her cheer right afterwards. So I respect her for that. Like, that is cool, because you do see some parents that just they act kind of different, right? When their kids don't pick where they want them to go. And she did an amazing job of that. And that Lamont is a great kid. He's one of my favorites I've covered. Just gonna let everybody know. Like, I'm going to cheer for that kid forever.
And going back to your point about Lamont, it's I shouldn't say that this is true 100% of the time, but I would say 90% of the time, if there's controversy regarding a specific recruitment, conflict of information, 90% of the time it's not because the kid lies, right?
No.
Like, most of these kids, frankly, don't know any better. They're 16, 17.
Mm-hmm.
They're not peddlers of misinformation by nature. And generally, they're going to be straight up with you.
They just tell you their emotion, whatever it is that day.
Yeah, exactly. More often than not, it's the adult. Like, if there's intentional deception, more often than not, it comes from the adults, whoever they may be in an individual recruitment.
Babbel is a proud sponsor of OU Insider and the Under the Visor podcast. The best way to learn a language is immersion, living where the language is spoken and using it every day. But if that's not in the cards this year, you can still learn a language the second best way, and that's with Babbel. Be a better you in 2024 with Babbel, the science-backed language learning app that actually works. Don't pay hundreds of dollars for private tutors or waste hours on apps that don't really help you speak the language. Look, if you're like me, you probably took a few years of Spanish or some other foreign language growing up, and everything went in one ear and out the other. You didn't really learn anything applicable to everyday life. But Babbel's convenient courses have helped me learn real-life conversation skills in a different language. It's so easy to learn how to order food, ask for directions, speak to merchants, etc., without having to consult language apps while on vacation. Now, here's a special limited time deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/OUinsider. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/OUinsider, spelled BABBEL.com/OUinsider. Rules and restrictions may apply.
I think Lamont's people spoke to a source, let's just say around the Swiss, and they even said, like, you got conflicting information with the Rogers situation all the time, and people were not lying. It's just what they believed and what Rogers was saying on that exact day.
Yeah.
Happens all the time. I wish you all could understand that. It happens all the time with us. Like, somebody will say this, the other person says this. Now you have to kind of sift through and figure out what's what. But it happens all the time because the kid's mind changes with the wind. And as frustrating as it is, that's what you get for covering teenagers. I mean, I'm just going to say it. So it's part of the job. It's tough, but it is what it is. Now right now he's headed off to Missouri, and I'll bet he's going to be successful. So, and good luck to him. I'm going to cheer for that kid 100%. On the Fasusi thing, regarding the Texas and like that, they're not willing to deter from how they do things, or Sark isn't. And I have to respect that. Like I said earlier, Oklahoma's going to do the same thing. That's where it's going to get interesting, Parker. Like, how much are they going to be willing to throw at him to get him. I get the optics of it if they miss out, right? If Texas misses here, it's just people are going to be pissed. But something tells me that they're going to find a way to go grab somebody else or flip an offensive lineman from somebody else, whether it be, I don't know. I don't know who I'm thinking of here, but like there'll be somebody out there that they're going to flip later on. And I think that's something Oklahoma fans also need to grasp. Like if Susi lands at Texas, as Parker alluded to earlier, they are not going to sit on their hands. They are going to find somebody, and they're going to get that somebody on an official visit, and they're going to try to flip them from whoever and wherever they're at. And either that or they're going to have somebody clearly in mind that they've heard buzz on getting in the portal that could come in and help them instantly, and they're going to go all in like they did with Rouse, right? Like they did with a Garen Hatchett or Branson Hickman, or I'm trying to think of who else.
And much as I mentioned
yeah.
that there is hopefully no stigma anymore regarding NIL, hopefully the portal stigma begins to go away as well. Because as long as you're acquiring the talent, it doesn't really matter where it comes from, does it?
Yes, thank you. Like that's the thing. People are like with Beat and Bow. That is another thing we need to discuss because it draws me up a freaking wall. Like people have not grasped that there's multiple ways to build a roster now, and they're like, well, he relies too much on the portal. Okay, has your offensive line sucked because of it? No, it's actually been pretty damn good. So what are we talking about? Like, who cares?
Yeah. Well,
Who
a lot of
cares?
this discourse is just honest. Like a lot of those conversations are not worth having, quite frankly, because there's just no validity to them. We've been going for what, darn near 45 minutes.
Yeah, we haven't
now?
even talked about
and
the
we haven't
big
even
one,
talked
right?
about
Like-
Amarian Robinson. Amarian Robinson committed. He is now the
Yes.
highest ranked member of Oklahoma's 2025 class on the defensive side of the ball. The
Per
number
Rivals,
121 player in the nation. And the defensive back MVP recently at the Rivals 5-star in Jacksonville. Really good ad for Brandon Hall. And as you look at that room, we probably have not talked about it enough because we get caught up scrutinizing other position groups that carry the headlines a little bit more: quarterback, wide receiver, defensive line, et al. Brandon Hall in the next year or two is going to have a case to make for having assembled the best safety room in the country.
Yes. And this
because
is the best
it's
safety
loaded.
room. Yeah, it's the best safety room I've ever seen at Oklahoma. And you have to remember, there was a point in time that Roy Williams, JT Thatcher, Brandon Everidge were all on the same team. I mean, of course, that's just the starters. But that safety room that he's built is not just for the starters. Like, it's stupid. It is so good. Like, you have to look at it like this. So right now you have RSJ and Billy Bowman that look like they're going to be the starters right now, right? Oh, and by the way, when they go into a dime package, which they're going to quite a bit because there's this guy that wears number 22 that has to see the field a ton and should be on the field a ton.
Good.
If there wasn't a Billy Bowman on this roster, that would be your starting strong safety, and he still might be argue for being one of the top 1, 2, 3 safeties in the SEC. Like, that's how good this room is, Parker. That your backup strong safety could be one of the best players in the conference. And just like he was in the Big 12 when he was healthy last year, right?
Well,
like,
and
Billy Bowman and Peyton Bowen were two of the best safeties in the whole conference. And Bowen didn't even start.
Yeah, well, a
Think about that.
couple of months ago, we had Dusty Dvorak on the podcast, right? And I asked him, how many elite football players does Oklahoma have on the defensive side of the ball? He rattled off 4 names. 3 of them weren't surprising: Billy Bowman, Danny Stutzman, Dominic Williams. Then he threw Peyton Bowen's name out there.
Yeah.
Which just goes to show you, some of the more respected national voices in college football are starting to see the light. They're starting to see the reality with the room that Brandon Hall has built. And to me, I think the greatest testament to how deep and how talented it is, and Amarian Robinson is just going to be another invaluable piece in the equation. But to me, you have three absolute studs that are true freshmen in Reggie Powers, Michael Boganowski, and Jaden Hardy. All three will probably play at some point this year. But Brandon, you really don't need those guys this year.
No.
Like, to think that you have three freshman safeties that are that talented, and you don't even need to use them if you don't want to.
No, but I think you're going to get to see Boganowski play quite a bit of. He's going to roam around a lot, right? Like, I think he and Peyton Bowen and Reggie Powers will do a lot of playing of multiple positions. Cheetah, I think you'll see all three at Cheetah at some point in time during the season, and some package that Oklahoma throws out there defensively. I was talking to a source the other day, and without even prompting this, the source goes, if I am to bet right now, the guy that could end up being, outside of Peyton Bowen, the most elite would be Michael Boganowski. They think he has a chance to be a first rounder. And then they followed it up by going, and the crazy part is that Reggie Powers and Jaden Hardy have that potential too.
Yeah.
You don't know what to do with all that. And I said, so what makes them all three so special? And the source goes, well, Boganowski can play everywhere.
Yeah.
He can play linebacker. He can play cheetah. He can play free. He can play strong. Once he gets his footwork down, because he never did it, he's going to be special. He goes, you saw the spring game where he was just lighting dudes up. Now wait till when he's starting to understand the defense fully, and it's not a late reaction. He's going to pick that ball off, or that ball is going to be jar loose. It's going to be there even a millisecond quicker to jar that ball loose for an incompletion and or a fumble. They said Reggie Powers is just, he understands it mentally, physically. He just gets it.
Yeah.
He just gets it. And as long as he continues to get it, he's going to play. And with Jaden Hardy, they said he's just a dog. He's not the biggest. He's not the strongest. He's not the fastest. But he's a football player. And those type of kids in BV's defense generally are successful. You got to hold on to them, though. That's going to be the key, is trying to figure out how you can hold on to them. I think if you were, it's just going to be tough.
And man, that Reggie Powers and Jaden Hardy are amazing football players. The fact that Brandon Hall won the battle for those two on the recruiting trail is impressive. But to me, I think one of the more impressive things of the entire Venables era to this point is Brandon Hall's eval of Michael Boganowski. Like, the fact that you could go look at a 0-star linebacker at the time from Junction City, Kansas, with offers from like Kansas, K-State, Iowa State. I don't even know who else. He was not a popular guy on the recruiting trail at that point. To go look at a guy that was playing linebacker in Junction City, Kansas, and see that much potential, and that much potential that has been, to an extent, immediately realized at Oklahoma as a safety, just that just speaks to how good Brandon Hall is at his job.
Yeah.
And he's going to be one worth keeping around in the years to come. And to that point, he's been recruiting Amarian Robinson since the kid's freshman year. And that's really where OU won this battle, Brandon, is relationships. And one of the things that I think was so impressive about the way that Oklahoma navigated this process with Amarian Robinson was, not only did they manage to talk him off his Oregon official visit, which was originally scheduled for June 21st through the 23rd, in order to come to the Champion Barbecue, but in talking with a variety of sources, what has become very apparent is that when Amarian Robinson was in town for the Champ U barbecue, he heard everything he needed to hear for his specific situation and his circumstance. OU made an immaculate pitch to the kid, an immaculate final pitch as to why you need to be here at the University of Oklahoma and not at Arkansas, not at Oregon, but here in Norman with this staff surrounded by these people.
The crazy part is like Georgia was just recruiting the hell out of Amarian Robinson, and he backed off of Georgia because of Oklahoma. I think people need to understand that. Like, Oregon was always going to be in it because he loved that area. He liked the fact that there was nothing to do in Eugene. Like, that appealed to him. And if now that people know a little bit about his story, right? He's had two brothers that have been shot and killed, and he'll openly talk to you about it. Like, he's got a 10-month-old or now 11-month-old daughter, and that's something that he and I related to because I have a 10-month-old baby girl. He's got a 11-month-old baby girl. They're a month apart, and he sees life a little differently, like way differently than almost everybody else. And he had to grow up fast. And so being around guys that in a program like Oklahoma that was very much built on the foundation of helping people get through things like that, and with the resources and the soul mission, that related a ton to Marion, and particularly his mom, which played a vitally crucial in this. And then, by the way, people talk about NIL. I want to throw this out here for everybody. I'm not going to throw numbers out because that's nobody's business, but I asked, Mara and I were talking about NIL, and I just asked him, like, NIL wise, like, what's been the toughest thing? He said, there's nothing tough about it. He said the surprising part was NIL is going to be better at Oklahoma than it was at Oregon. Like, when you hear a kid say that, that shocked to me. And I think, Parker, it should shock everybody, because you think of Oregon as like this juggernaut, right? When it comes to NIL. And Oklahoma was willing to do more for Marion than Oregon was. And now I get that Oregon's still in it for, Jalen Williams or Jonah Williams, excuse me. And I know that they're still in it with, I believe, McNutt, right? And so I don't know. I just, like, they wanted him very badly. So much so that they were still willing to bring him in on the 15th instead of the 21st when he decided to go Oklahoma with his last official visit. So they pushed very, very hard for him. They did everything that they could, but they also understood that distance was going to play a major factor, and Oregon knew that they were playing behind the 8 ball with that. Oklahoma knew that Oregon was going to do everything in their power to get him, and Brandon Hall had the best relationship, and then the collective came in and did what they needed to do to seal the deal for Amarian Robinson to help out his family with the situation that he's in. I think that was very key. And Amarian's open about that. He's open about it. At the end of the day, I believe Arkansas had the highest of all highs when it came to NIL because they wanted to keep him in state. They know how good he is. Our own Adam Gorney said that Amarian Robinson may be the best safety in the 2025 class. Like, Gorney doesn't tweet things like that. He's not one of those guys that goes out and says stuff like that publicly. But if you go and you watch anything that he did at Rivals 5-Star, he jumped in front of people to get more reps. That dude took more reps than I can. He took 10 times more reps than everybody else because he wanted it. Like, that's where you see the maturity in him. He's at a different stage in his life than everybody else. He's got a kid. He's seen more with his brothers, right? Like, he's just been through it. So he knows what he has to do to get where he needs to be to make sure his family is going to be taken care of. And that is all he cares about. He doesn't go party. He doesn't like going out and doing things. He wants to be with his family. He wants to be with his family nearby. And that's it. And he wants to take care of them and play ball. That's it. That's what that kid's all about. He's about making sure he has good grades. He goes to a charter school, for those that don't know. Shows you how smart he is. Number two, he's all about ball. All he does is work. And he's all about his family. That's all that kid cares about. That's why he's going to be successful. And that's why he's skyrocketing up the rankings right now, because of that factor. Brandon Hall saw that at a very young age before, obviously, he had a child. But, man, this is, Parker, to me, like, this is one of those stories. If you're an OU fan, you've got to instantly latch onto this kid and just cheer for this kid. You want him to be successful because of his backstory. His backstory, like, my hair stands up on my arms every time I think about it, because it is, like, if you actually know, and one of these days, Parker, I want to get him here. I want to get him on our podcast, and I want him to talk about it so everybody understands everything that he's been through. Mm-hmm. It's one thing to hear it. It's another thing to hear it from the person that's going through it and that has been through it. It's tough. Yeah. It's a tough story to hear and listen to, but it's made him. And he told me at the Rivals 5-star, and I'll never forget this. He said, he looked at me, he said, "Drum, I've been through a lot." I said, "Yeah, you have." He goes, "And I'm going to make it out. And so is my family." He goes, "I'm going to make sure of it." How can you not cheer for somebody like that?
Yep.
That is awesome. That is, again, my hair is like standing up. Like, that is awesome. Like, I love.
That is a 5-star mentality, right?
Yes.
There.
Yes.
And I was looking at some of the industry rankings on Amarian Robinson when he committed. That there's no way on God's green earth that kid's a 3-star.
No, what the hell is that, by the way?
I don't know. You know what's wild is right now, our National Council on Rivals regards 17 of Oklahoma's 21 verbal commits as of today as 4-star players.
Crazy.
There's another. I'm not going to say which one. You can do your own research. There's another site that has 7 of the 21 in 4-star territory. 7. The other 14 are 3 stars. One of them is Amarian Robinson, which, again, just doesn't make sense to me. I get rankings are an inexact science, but
it's subjective.
Just watching how smooth that kid is at the Rivals 5-star, no way. Absolutely no way.
Feet, bro. His feet are so sweet. Like, and that's all everybody was talking about, is how a safety play. This is how good his feet are. He could come to Oklahoma right now and they can move him to corner and he would be in the top 2 deep right now. Like, that's how good he is at covering. But you want to know what makes him a safety, Parker? Is he'll come downhill and light your ass up. And that's you go watch his film, like, he will come downhill and he will light your ass up. So that's why OU loves him. That's why everybody loves him. That's why he was so ballyhooed. That's why Georgia, LSU, Oregon, Oklahoma wanted him so badly. We all know Arkansas wanted him. I just never thought he was going to Arkansas. Arkansas was never really in the. I hate saying this, and yeah, I guess they could flip him if there's like a coaching change, which happens a lot, right? When there's a coaching change at the in-state school that you went up against, and that new staff comes in and builds the we're going to change the world. Like, you hear that all the time in Arkansas. That's not me taking a shot at Arkansas. It's just the reality of their program. It just is. It's always the next guy up's going to change it, and it doesn't happen. But they just never were that big of. He was always going to respect them. He was always going to take a visit there. He was always going to do everything he could to give them a chance, because it was the right thing to do for the in-state school.
Yeah.
But it was always Oregon, Oklahoma, LSU, Georgia was always the teams. And then when he threw Georgia off his top 5, remember how surprising that was when he announced that? Because Georgia looked to be, he had just come from Georgia. like a few weeks prior to that. That was shocking. That shows you how good of a recruiter Brandon Hall is, because I know for a fact that Oklahoma was worried about Georgia at that time. Oregon wasn't it. LSU wasn't it. Arkansas wasn't it. It was Georgia was a school that Oklahoma was worried about. And then all of a sudden, when he nixed that, that's when Oklahoma started feeling really good about where they stood.
Now, let's take a spin around the rest of the board in the 2025 class, because there's not much left. Mentioned already with Cortez Mills and now Amarian Robinson on board, 21 verbal commits for the Sooners.
Mm-hmm.
You're probably looking at a class that tops out at 25. I would estimate the Sooners add another offensive tackle, as we've discussed. That'll be their final piece on the offensive side. And then at this point, you're really just searching for.
Did that number of 25 seem kind of big? Like when you think about it in
Yes.
retrospect, like a year ago, like we were talking like maybe 21.
Yeah, we were saying 21 or 23. Emmett Jones kind of screwed that up for all of us, taking five receivers, 5 really good receivers too. We'll forgive him for that.
Enjoying this episode of the Under the Visor podcast? There's plenty more exclusive content, including team and recruiting intel from the market's top insiders, when you become a subscriber. Head to OUinsider.com to get started today and join the vibrant online community of Sooner fans on the Rivals Network. It'll only cost you a few bucks a month, and take my word for it, we'll make it worth your while.
But no, I think, you pick up another offensive tackle. You can call it good on the offensive side. And then defensively, all you need at this point is one more defensive lineman. Oh, you would love for that to be Floyd Boucard. One more defensive end. We expect that to be Cade Petchak. Frankly, surprised that he hasn't gone public yet. And then obviously a linebacker. I would say Christian Jones is the leader in the clubhouse right now to be OU's final piece at the linebacker.
Can you talk about that? Like, explain to people the Christian Jones situation before we get into Cade Petchak. Please explain to him. I think we need to cover all 3 of those guys, by the way. So let's do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just quickly hit Petchak because there's not a lot there. He took his 4 official visits. Sources on the OU side fully expect that he is going to announce for the Sooners at some point. I don't know when that's going to be. The kid doesn't talk to anybody, so there's no way of knowing. But the OU is firmly in command of that recruitment right now. And then with Christian Jones, yeah, and I think we discussed a little bit on the podcast last week, but it's OU, Auburn, and Nebraska. He was kicking around the idea of a Miami visit at the end of July, but Miami's got 3 linebackers committed now with the addition of Gavin Nix last week, and so I don't really think Miami will get too heavily involved. So that leaves OU, that leaves Auburn, and that leaves Nebraska. Obviously, from the relational and cultural standpoint, I think Oklahoma has the upper hand for a Midwest kid over Auburn. That's part of why I fired in the future cast in favor of OU last week. The reason why I like OU over Nebraska right now is he's been very upfront with a lot of people. Is he wants to go somewhere where he can win. And right now, that's not Nebraska. He's a Husker legacy. And so if they win big this fall, if they go win 10 games, okay, yeah, you know what? He's probably a Cornhusker. But make no mistake, if they go 5-7, 6-6 again, he's not jumping at the opportunity to jump on board the black shirts. That kid will be a Sooner at that point. And he's the only guy left on the linebacker board for Oklahoma, kind of like the situation with Floyd Boucard at defensive line, right? If you don't get Floyd Boucard, then you got to make some more offers. That's kind of where Oklahoma's at, not only with defensive tackles, but with linebackers. You don't get Christian Jones, well, you got to go make some more offers. You got to go find somebody, or you just got to hold out for the portal.
So let me ask you this. As far as Christian Jones goes, do you feel like there is a chance that he commits to Oklahoma? And yeah, I know you said that, if Nebraska wins, that could change everything. But let's say he commits to Oklahoma. What are the odds that if Nebraska goes 9-3, 10-2, or 8-4, that flips?
It's hard to say. I think a very natural parallel is Nate Roberts out there at Washington, who's solidly committed to Ohio State right now, right? And like,
Yeah, I don't ever see that changing, by the way.
no, and I don't either. But that's a kid that kind of like Christian Jones, right? Nate Roberts has every reason to want to commit to Oklahoma and be part of the outstanding football tradition at the University of Oklahoma, but he just wanted something a little different, and Ohio State makes a lot of sense for him from that standpoint. It's the kind of the same deal with Christian Jones in Nebraska. Like it kind of feels like similar to Roberts. He just wants something different. And so if Nebraska wins 8-9 games, sure, then I would imagine he'll have a lot of folks, former teammates, et cetera, that are in his ear to flip to Nebraska. How much does that actually matter? I don't know, man. Like I don't think he's an auto flip. I'll put it that way. I don't think he's an auto flip if Nebraska goes and puts together a 9-3 season.
What about his dad?
What about it?
Isn't he a legacy?
He is. Again, I don't think that is going to weigh too heavily on his because to be honest, Brandon, the fact that he's not already committed to Nebraska, having held that offer for almost 3 years at this point, that tells you where he's at with Nebraska.
Yeah.
He's not closed off to the possibility, but he's by no means all in with the possibility.
With Floyd Bicard, there's a part of me that favors Oklahoma, but I can't get Miami out of my head. I can't
either, man. It's hard.
I know he's.
You know what it reminds me of?
Alabama seems like they should be the other team that's the issue, right? But I just don't know that I feel like. Do you feel like Alabama's up there?
No, I really don't.
I don't either.
I think right now it's Oklahoma, USC, and Miami.
Yeah, and I would. What do you think of USC? Like, do you think that that's like?
You know what it reminds me of?
You trust like at the end of the day, that's where he would pick if he was going to pick between those three. And let's say, for lack of better, if the gun's to your head, who do you think he picks? Like right now,
gun to my head, Miami.
Interesting. You want to expound on that because a lot of people.
To me, like here's the thing: the more I think about it, this feels like a carbon copy of the Dominic McKinley situation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Where, because the thing with Dominic McKinley all along was, okay, it's obvious that LSU makes sense. Kids from the boot with the LSU offer that LSU pushes for, they wind up going to LSU. Kids at Miami Central with a Miami offer that Miami pushes for, they go to Miami. And so to me, and I think when Dominic McKinley originally committed, I think it was August 1st of last year. August 1st or September 1st. I can't recall. But he committed, and it was between Oklahoma and Texas A&M. And then by the end of the cycle, it, of course, was LSU, which, you saw that come down, and it kind of felt like it had been inevitable all along. Now, with Boucard, I don't question that he could commit to USC or Oklahoma on July 20th, which is when he plans on making his decision. The question then becomes, can you hold it? Can you hold it with Miami looming all summer, all fall, on into the winter, and through?
We're going to find out in a few weeks, man. June 21st or July 21st, excuse me, July 21st.
Yeah. So I think that my sense is that is a recruitment that will not end on his commitment date either. Regardless of where he commits, I don't think it's over.
So where's your gut say July 21st is going? And mine right now kind of is Oklahoma, but as you said, National Signing Day is a completely different story than what's announced on July 21st.
It's the 20th, July 20th.
July 20th, excuse me. Yeah.
Honestly, like, if I'm being completely 100% transparent, my gut right now is that he commits to USC on July 20th. Now, again, my expectation is that that will not hold because USC can't hang on to anybody at this point. So they really impressed Boucard on the official visit. There's legitimate reason why you've seen all those predictions for USC. It's because he loves the campus. He loves Eric Henderson. He is originally from Canada, moved across the border, I think, to Connecticut, New Jersey, something like that. Then down to Alabama. Now he's at Miami. So he's been all over the place. Geography is of no consequence to him. And so going all the way across the country to Southern California is not something he's going to blink twice at. So to me,
do they have the NIL to compete with Miami and Oklahoma, though?
Well,
I don't think they do.
Do they? They sure act like they do. They sure act like they do. When the kids
figure out that they don't,
and that's kind of my point. Right now, right this second, I would say he commits to USC next weekend.
That's interesting.
I don't think he signs with USC.
No. I think the bigger question is, okay, so where does Oklahoma go with defensive tackle at that point? Because now
I think you just keep pushing for the kid. If he commits to USC, you're not giving up. Why would you give up? Why
I don't know, because I know how Oklahoma operates and thinks. Like, okay, we gave you a chance.
Yeah.
You know, you obviously, in their mind, they're going to say, and this is me speaking off of my gut. It's not how I have never heard Oklahoma come out and flat say this, but that's not true. I've heard them say this about certain people that they did not go and re-recruit after they committed elsewhere, but it's more the fact, okay, you chose USC. How serious are you really about football? That's going to be some of the people's thoughts within that program.
No, and I hear you. You could have said the same about Williams Winery in Missouri last August when he committed there, because that was before Missouri went and won 11 games. So I think they love Floyd. OU loves Floyd Boucard. We know this much. We know they think the world of him as a football player, and he's been on the top of the board for a long, long time.
Yes,
so,
they love him. Yes.
Yeah, if he commits to USC, no, I don't think they quit pushing. And
do you think Oklahoma lands a big transfer at defensive tackle again? I do. I think that becomes a calling card for Oklahoma.
Yeah, I could
because it has to.
More likely, here's what I think would happen if Boucard committed elsewhere on July 20th. They would go offer somebody else. They would go eval somebody else, get somebody else committed, and that essentially becomes your insurance policy against the prospect of not signing Floyd Boucard. Because Oklahoma was prepared to take 4 defensive tackles. They were prepared to take Cole Breeler and Christian Evans. So that's not necessarily extraneous to the original plans, but it does give you a little bit more comfort in whatever the ultimate outcome with Boucard would be. And obviously you can avert all of this by just getting the kid's commitment on July 20th, which would be ideal for the Sooners.
Is there a world where Oklahoma can flip Cole Breeler from Stanford, or do you think that's over?
I think that's over.
Yeah. With that to me, that kind of falls into you chose Stanford. You're not.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't even have to finish the sentence. So that kind of is and that's my opinion. That's my opinion of not so my opinion of the kid, but more so my opinion of how things are being perceived at a much larger scale around the country when it comes to that. Kids that choose that, you kind of question whether they're all in with football to begin with. And you have to respect it though, Parker, because they see a bigger picture than the sport. Yeah. So that also is respectful. It's hard to be mad at a kid for choosing Stanford.
No.
Period.
And you're not gonna hold it against a kid
making
that decision if you're
props to you, bro. Glad you're smart.
Yeah, but by the same token, it's probably not a kid that you're going to try all that hard to flip at that point.
All right. So before we go, next week, SEC Media Days, bro. I am hyped. Hype. What are you most looking forward to about this next venture that we're on?
Here's my suggestion. Let's table this discussion and come back to it on the podcast later this week, because as of right now, I don't even know what else we're going to have to talk about later this week on the podcast. So
fair enough.
We're going to have to come up with something.
Ideas. I have some good ideas, but we will table it and we will discuss this on a further podcast. If you're not at OU Insider VIP, you should be, because there's a lot going on. Yeah, obviously Oklahoma's looking to close out the 25 class, but the 26 class is starting to ramp up very, very quickly, particularly with Sooners on the Stars coming up on July 25th. There will be a lot of 26, 27, 28 kids in. We are already starting to have, of a few really huge 26 kids that are coming in on that date. Huge. And if you've been on OU Insider, we've already discussed it. We've thrown it out there in notes. We will get a list up starting here pretty quickly of both that and Party at the Palace. That will be on the day after, I believe, July 26th. Whatever that weekend, the last weekend of July, is that the 26, 27 or 25, 26, whatever those two dates are. That is when those two are at the Party in the Palace and Sooners on the Stars. We will have that list for you. We will have updates from those camps. We will have updates from SEC Media Day. We will be coming live daily at SEC Media Day for you guys with some cool content. On top of that, obviously fall camp's rolling around the corner, right? OU is about to kick off their SEC season here in less than 60 days. So, like, if you are not, that is crazy to think about, Parker, by the way. If you are not on OU Insider VIP, go give us a try right now. $9.95 a month or $99.95 will get you the whole year. It'll get you all the way up to whatever day you sign up in 2025. Bam, you get a whole year of OU Insider. That means you get everything covered, whether it's all the national signing days, the whole SEC season, all of fall camp, Party in the Palace, next year's Champ U barbecue, all the official visits, spring football, all the junior days in the winter, the bowl game, the playoffs, whatever Oklahoma's in, the SEC title. Get basketball covered. You get softball covered. You get baseball covered. It's all covered. If you sign up right now for $9.95, you get all of that. And you get the insider information, like the Skip Johnson stuff. If you were on OU Insider, you didn't fall for the he's going to Texas A&M stuff. You knew he was staying because we said it from day one that it would be a surprise if he left. And if you're on OU Insider VIP, you knew that. And we had reasons. We had quotes of why that was happening from people that were directly connected to Skip Johnson. So sign up right now. You'll get that. You'll get all the transfer portal stuff as far as what's Najee Kennedy going to do, right? What is she going to do, Parker? We think it's Oklahoma, but Jesse and Brian, they have that covered for you. Brody has basketball covered for you better than anybody. He's out in front of all the recruiting stuff, all the transfer stuff. He nailed it this past offseason and this past spring and summer when it came to the basketball recruiting. He's still doing so. It is heating up very quickly for Oklahoma as they look to finish off the 2025 class and start in the 2026 class of basketball as well. We got it covered for you. We've got women's covered for you. We got it all covered for you on OU Insider VIP. Again, $9.95 a month or $99.95 will get you a whole year. Come try us out. Come see what makes everybody love OU Insider, why there's dang near 5 figures of fans on OU Insider right now talking it up. It is awesome. It's fun. It's busy. You get to talk to Parker and I daily. That's a gift, right? Maybe. If you like us. If you don't like us, well, then you can hate on us. And you can hate on us daily on OU Insider VIP. We get that too. We love it. Bring all the haters on. All right. Subscribe to this YouTube channel. Daily content. Basketball, baseball, football, softball, recruiting. all right here on OU Insider YouTube. For Parker Thune, my name's Brandon Drum. You guys have a blessed day.